The clinking of silverware against porcelain was the only sound that dared to occupy the space between us. It was a brittle, sharp noise that seemed to amplify the silence rather than fill it. I never thought the day would come when I'd feel like a stranger at my own family's table, an unwelcome ghost in the warm, wood-paneled dining room my late husband, Robert, and I had designed together. Last night we gathered for what was supposed to be a peaceful family dinner. My son Mark sat to my left, his shoulders hunched, his gaze fixed on the perfectly seared salmon on his plate. Across from me, his wife Emily was a vision of modern elegance, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek chignon, her perfect smile hiding the razor sharpness of her words. It started with small, insidious remarks, each one a tiny paper cut on my soul. "Oh, Carol, you're so quiet these days. You don't help much anymore, do you?" she'd said while I was clearing the appetizer plates, her voice dripping with faux concern. Later, when Mark mentioned the leaking faucet in their guest bathroom, Emily had laughed, a sound like glass shattering. "Well, we can't ask Mom for help. She just sits there quietly, not much use for fixing things." Each comment was designed to chip away at me, to render me smaller and smaller in my own home. And then came the final blow. As I was about to ask if anyone wanted more wine, Emily looked directly at me, her eyes cold despite the smile plastered on her face. She turned to Mark, loud enough for the whole room to hear, and said, "It's a shame, really. I was hoping for a mother-in-law who could be a partner, a contributor, not just—" She paused, gesturing vaguely in my direction with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Useless." The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Useless. The clinking stopped. The room went utterly, profoundly silent. I saw Mark flinch, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his fork. He looked down, his face flushed with a familiar, gutless embarrassment. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He never did when Emily went on the attack. My heart, which I thought had already been broken into its smallest possible pieces when I lost Robert 6 months ago, found a new way to fracture. But I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just held her gaze, lifted the corners of my mouth into a serene, knowing smile, and took a slow sip of my water, because Emily didn't know what I had planned. She didn't know about the letter my late husband left for me, tucked away in his old safe. She had no idea that the letter revealed truths she had been desperately, meticulously hiding for years. She certainly didn't know that I had spent that very morning with our family lawyer, Mr. Davies, a man who had been a friend to Robert for over 40 years. So I sat there, a portrait of calm, letting her savor her little victory. I let her believe she had won, that she had finally cornered the quiet old widow and proven her irrelevance. She thought I was powerless. She thought I had nothing left. She was so wrong. Before you go any further with my story, I have to mention that I've heard YouTube has been unsubscribing people from channels without any warning, so just take a quick second to check if you're still subscribed. If you're not, please consider resubscribing so you don't miss how this story unfolds. After dinner, the drive home was a blur of streetlights smearing across my windshield. The silence in my car was a comfort, a stark contrast to the oppressive quiet at the dinner table. When I walked into my house, the familiar scent of old books and Robert's faint lingering cologne wrapped around me like a hug. It was a house filled with memories, with echoes of laughter and love. Every corner held a piece of him, a piece of us. For a moment the weight of Emily's cruelty settled heavily on my shoulders. I sank into Robert's favorite leather armchair in the study, the worn leather sighing under my weight. I felt the sting of tears, hot and sharp. Useless. The word echoed in the quiet room. Was that what I had become? Since Robert's passing, a part of me had certainly gone dormant, He was my compass, my partner in everything. We ran our small but successful hardware supply business together for 35 years. He was the face of the company, the charismatic negotiator. I was the engine, the one who managed the books, the inventory, the logistics. Nobody saw my work, but it was the foundation everything was built on. When he got sick, we sold the business to a larger corporation, securing a comfortable retirement, a retirement we were supposed to share. Now, I spent my days gardening, reading and managing the estate he left behind. To Emily, who thrived on social status and a busy public life, my quiet existence must have seemed pointless. She saw the large house, the comfortable savings, and saw only a resource to be tapped, not a life to be respected. She and Mark lived in a chic modern condo downtown that was just a little too expensive for Mark's salary as an architect. I knew they were stretched thin. I'd helped them with the down payment, a gesture Emily had accepted as her due rather than a gift. Her frustration had been growing for months, her hints about me selling my big empty house becoming more and more frequent. My gaze fell upon the small, formidable steel safe in the corner of the study. Robert had given me the combination on one of his last clear days. "Carol," he had whispered, his voice raspy, "there's something in there for you. Don't open it unless you feel lost, unless you feel like you're losing your footing." I had felt my footing crumble tonight. With trembling hands I knelt and spun the dial. The lock clicked open with a satisfying thud. Inside, on top of a stack of property deeds and investment portfolios, was a single sealed envelope made of thick, cream-colored paper. My name was written on the front in Robert's strong, familiar script. I carried it back to the armchair and slit it open with a letter opener from his desk. The letter inside was not long. "My dearest Carol, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and I am sorry beyond words to have left you alone, but I am also afraid it means that my deepest worries have come to pass. I love our son, but I know he is easily led by a strong will, and Emily has the strongest will I have ever seen. I don't believe she is a bad person at her core, but I believe she is desperate, and desperate people do foolish things. For the past year, I noticed things, small financial discrepancies when she was helping me with online banking, conversations she would abruptly end when I entered a room. I could never prove anything, but my gut told me something was wrong. She has a life, a past, that we know nothing about. Carol, you are not useless. You are the strongest person I know. You were the rock of our business, and the heart of our family. Don't ever let anyone make you forget that." Inside this envelope is a key. It belongs to a storage unit I rented under my old college nickname Bobby R. It's at the secure store facility off I-95. The paperwork is with Mr. Davies. I don't know what you'll find there, if anything, but I had to give you a place to start looking. Trust your instincts. They have always been sharper than mine. Whatever you do, protect what we built, protect our son, and most importantly, protect you. All my love forever, Robert. Tears now flowed freely, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of love, of a steel resolve hardening in my chest. He had seen it, he had known, even from beyond. He was still looking out for me. Tucked into the fold of the letter was a small cold metal key. It felt heavy in my palm, like the key to my own liberation. Emily thought the game was over. She had no idea I was just about to make my first move. The next morning, the grey dawn light barely pierced the blinds, but I was wide awake. The hurt from the night before had cooled into a solid core of purpose. I made my coffee, the familiar ritual grounding me, and sat at the kitchen table with Robert's letter and the small key. Secure store off I-95. I knew the place. It was a sprawling complex of orange and blue doors, a place where people stored the pieces of their lives they couldn't quite part with. My first call was to Mr. Davies. His voice was warm and concerned when he answered. "Carol, Good morning. Is everything all right? You sound determined, Henry. I finished for him. I'm determined. I opened Robert's letter. There was a pause on the other end. Ah, he said, his tone shifting to one of quiet understanding. I see. He told me about it. He said you'd know when the time was right. The paperwork for that storage unit is in your file here. Unit 247. It's paid up for the next 5 years. He took care of everything. Did he ever tell you what he suspected? I asked, tracing the edge of the key with my thumb. He spoke in generalities. Henry said cautiously. Worries about Emily's spending habits. A certain opacity about her past. He mentioned she was very guarded about her old laptop, the one she had before she met Mom. Robert was a shrewd man, Carol. He didn't make accusations lightly. After the call, I knew what I had to do. The thought of confronting Emily directly was pointless. She was a master of denial and deflection. I needed facts. I needed proof. Robert had given me a breadcrumb, and I had to follow the trail. The drive to the storage facility was filled with a nervous energy. The Florida sun was already beating down, the air thick with humidity. I pulled up to the gate, punched in the code Henry had given me, and the metal arm lifted. I navigated the maze of identical corridors until I found it. Unit 247. The blue metal door was cool to the touch. The lock was stiff, but the key turned. With a groan of protest, the door rolled up, revealing a small dark space that smelled of dust and sealed plastic. It wasn't cluttered. Robert was never a man for clutter. There were 3 neatly labeled plastic tubs, and a small wooden crate. I opened the first tub. It was filled with old files from the business, documents I thought we had shredded years ago. The second held some of Robert's old hobby equipment, fly fishing gear and woodworking tools. My heart ached for a moment. Then I moved to the wooden crate, prying it open with a crowbar. I found in my trunk. I discovered its contents. Inside, nestled in packing foam, was a sleek silver laptop. It was an older model, one I vaguely recognized. Emily's. Underneath it was a manila folder. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted it out. Inside were not business documents but printouts, credit card statements, all addressed to an Emily Peterson at an apartment address in Tampa I didn't recognize. The statements were from 3 years ago, the year before she met Mark. I sat on the dusty concrete floor of the storage unit and began to read. The numbers were staggering, page after page of high-end purchases, designer handbags, shoes from boutiques I'd never heard of, lavish spa days, airline tickets to Las Vegas and Miami. The balances were astronomical, tens of thousands of dollars spread across multiple cards. The final pages were letters from collection agencies, their language increasingly threatening. Emily Peterson had been drowning in debt. It was a lifestyle funded by credit, a house of cards ready to collapse. But then, about the time she met Mark, the paper trail went cold. It was as if that person, that life of reckless spending, had simply vanished. She had reinvented herself as Emily Vance, the sophisticated partner to a promising young architect. She hadn't solved her debt problem. She had just found a new, more sustainable source of funding. My son. It all started to make sense. Her desperation for us to sell the house, her constant pressure on Mark to ask me for money, her frustration with my uselessness. I wasn't useless to her. I was an obstacle. I was the gatekeeper to the financial security she craved, the solution to a secret past she was terrified would come to light. Thinking about how meticulously Robert planned this, and how Emily constructed her web of lies, it's a lot to take in. It reminds me that sometimes the people closest to us have the most hidden layers. If you're finding this story as gripping as I did living it, make sure to hit the like button. It really helps the channel reach more people who enjoy these kinds of real-life dramas. My phone buzzed in my purse, startling me. It was Mark. I let it go to voicemail, my mind racing too fast to form a coherent sentence. I packed up the laptop and the folder, locked the unit, and drove straight to Mr. Davies's office. I laid the statements out on his polished mahogany desk. He looked them over, his expression growing more grim with each page. "Good heavens," he murmured, adjusting his glasses. "This is extensive." She was in over her head, Henry. "And I don't think this debt just disappeared. I think she's been paying it off slowly, using Mark's income, maybe even money I've given them. That explains the pressure to sell your house," he said, leaning back in his chair. "A large infusion of cash from that sale would solve this problem for her permanently. It's a powerful motive." He tapped a finger on the desk. "Robert's will is very clear, Carol. He left the house and the majority of the liquid assets to you in trust. You have full control. Mark is the beneficiary upon your passing, but there's a clause. Robert had me draft it specifically. He called it the Character and Integrity Clause." He pulled out a thick document, Robert's will, and flipped to a marked page. "Article 5, Section C. It stipulates that any beneficiary who engages in deceitful, fraudulent, or malicious conduct intended to harm another family member or misappropriate family assets can be disinherited at the discretion of the trustee, that's you, with the presentation of sufficient evidence." I stared at him. A character and integrity clause. It was Robert's final brilliant move, a shield he had left for me. "Sufficient evidence?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Is this enough?" "This folder is a very strong start," Henry said, his voice firm. "But the laptop might be the key. We'll need to hire a forensic IT specialist to access it legally. If we can prove she's been actively hiding this debt and manipulating Mark for financial gain, then yes, Carol, you would have the authority to enact that clause." He looked at me, his expression serious. "The question is, what do you want to do?" What did I want to do? A week ago, I would have been horrified at the thought of disinheriting my own son, but the clause wasn't aimed at Mark. It was aimed at her. It was a tool not of revenge, but of protection. Protection for Mark from the woman who had married him under false pretenses. Protection for the legacy Robert and I had worked our entire lives to build. Leaving Henry's office, I felt a strange sense of calm. The path ahead was daunting, but it was clear. That evening, I listened to Mark's voicemail. "Mom, hey, it's me. Listen, about last night. Emily was out of line. She's just been so stressed with work, and you know everything. She feels terrible. We were hoping we could all have dinner again this weekend. Clear the air." The weakness in his voice, the tired excuses he made for her, it solidified my resolve. He was blinded by his love for her, or perhaps by his fear of her. He couldn't see the cage he was in. My job was not to punish him, but to show him the door. I didn't call him back, not yet. I had one more piece of evidence to find. I needed to see if the woman from the credit card statements was still alive and well, hiding behind Emily Vance's carefully constructed facade. And I had a feeling that old laptop held the answer. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of quiet, methodical action. Mr. Davies engaged a discreet forensic IT specialist, a young woman named Anya, who worked with a quiet efficiency that I found reassuring. She took the old laptop, promising to recover whatever she could. The waiting was the hardest part. Every time the phone rang, my heart leaped into my throat. I spent the time in my garden, pulling weeds with a vengeance, the physical work a balm for my anxious mind. With every weed I ripped from the soil, I felt like I was clearing away one of Emily's lies. Mark called again, his voice more strained this time. "Mom, are you getting my messages? Please call me back. Emily is really upset. She thinks you hate her." "I don't hate her," I thought, snipping the head off a dead rose. "I just see her." On the 3rd day, Anya called. "Vance, I have something for you," she said. I was able to recover a significant amount of data from the hard drive. Deleted files, email fragments, a browser history she tried to scrub. It's all here. I'm sending a password-protected file to Mr. Davies now. I think you'll find what you're looking for. I was at Henry's office within the hour. We sat side by side at his computer, scrolling through the recovered files. And there it was, a complete digital ghost of Emily Peterson. There were emails to the credit card companies, pleading for lower interest rates. There were applications for payday loans, all denied. But the most damning discovery was a series of emails from a separate hidden account. They were to a woman named Dana. The emails painted a vivid picture. Emily had been complaining about her crushing debt and her dead-end job in Tampa. Then the tone shifted. "Danny, you won't believe it. I met someone, he's an architect, from a good family. You know, old money, his parents own a big house, successful business. This could be it. This could be the solution to everything." Another email, a few months later. "It's getting serious. He's crazy about me. His mother, Carol, is quiet. I can't get a read on her. The dad, Robert, is sharp. I have to be careful around him. But they're comfortable. Very comfortable. If I play my cards right, all my troubles could be over." And the final chilling email, sent a week before her wedding to Mark. "The dad is sick. The doctors say it's bad. It's horrible, of course, but Danny, this changes the timeline. The estate will go to the mom, and then to Mark. I just have to be patient. I just have to make sure the mother sees things my way. I can't let her stand in the way." Henry read the last line and let out a long, slow breath. "My God, Carol, this is predatory." "It's a long con, Henry," I said, my voice cold and steady. "And it ends now." That evening, I called Mark. "Mark, I'm not angry. But we need to talk. I want you and Emily to come to the house tomorrow evening at 7. There are some things about your father's estate that we all need to discuss." "Oh, thank God, Mom," he said, relief flooding his voice. "Of course, we'll be there. We can finally put all this behind us." The next evening, at precisely 7, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find them standing on my porch. Mark looked relieved, and Emily had arranged her features into a mask of penitent sincerity. She was even holding a bouquet of lilies. "Carol, I am so sorry about the other night," she began, her voice soft and practiced. "I was completely out of line. I brought you these as a peace offering." "Thank you, Emily," I said, taking the flowers and placing them on the hall table without looking at them. "Please, come into the study." I led them into the room where it all began. Robert's study. I had them sit on the sofa, opposite his large leather armchair, where I took my seat. On the coffee table, between us, I had placed a single manila folder. "So," Mark began, smiling nervously. "What's this all about, Mom?" I looked at him, then my gaze shifted to Emily. I let the silence stretch for a moment, watching her perfect composure. "Emily," I began, my voice even. "The other night, you called me useless. It was hurtful, but it was also clarifying. It made me realize that my usefulness to you is directly tied to my financial assets." Emily's smile tightened. "Carol, that's not what I meant at all." "Let me finish," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. I leaned forward and opened the folder. The first things I pulled out were the credit card statements addressed to Emily Peterson. I laid them on the table. "Do you recognize this name?" Her face went pale. A flicker of genuine panic flashed in her eyes before she extinguished it. "I don't know what that is. It must be a mistake." "Is it?" I continued, my voice unwavering. "Because these statements detail over $70,000 in debt. A debt you had when you met my son. A debt I can't seem to find any record of you paying off through legitimate means." "This is insane," she stammered, looking at Mark for support. "Mark, tell her this is crazy." Mark looked confused, his eyes darting between me and the papers on the table. "Mom, what's going on?" "What's going on, Mark?" I said, my heart aching for the pain I was about to cause him, is that your wife married you under false pretenses. I then pulled out the printed emails. I didn't read them aloud, I simply turned them around and pushed them across the table towards her. These are emails you wrote to your friend Danny. Emails where you refer to my son as a solutions to your financial problems. Emails where you discuss my husband's illness as a change in your timeline. Emily stared at the papers as if they were venomous snakes. The color drained completely from her face, leaving behind a splotchy, chalky mask. She was speechless. The master of words had none left. "Emily," Mark whispered, his voice trembling. "What is this?" She finally looked at him, her eyes wide with desperation. "It's not what it looks like, Mark. She's twisting everything. Your mother is trying to drive us apart." "No," I said, my voice ringing with an authority I hadn't felt in years. "I am trying to save my son from a predator." I then pulled out the final document, a copy of Robert's will with Article from Section C highlighted in yellow. My husband was a wise man. He anticipated that someone might try to take advantage of our family. He put a clause in his will, a character and integrity clause. I explained what it meant. I explained that her deception, her manipulation, her calculated plan to secure our family's wealth to solve her secret problems was more than enough evidence to enact it. I had the power, as trustee, to protect the estate. Mark finally picked up one of the emails and read it. I watched his face collapse as he absorbed the words. The confusion turned to dawning horror, then to a deep, gut-wrenching betrayal. He looked at the woman beside him, but he wasn't seeing the beautiful, charming wife he loved. He was seeing a stranger, a fraud. "Is this true, Emily?" he asked, his voice cracking. Was I just a solution?" Emily opened her mouth, but only a choked sob came out. The mask was gone. The sophisticated woman was gone. In her place was a terrified girl, caught in a trap of her own making. In that moment, the game was over. The checkmate was absolute. The quietest person in the room had finally spoken, and her words had brought the entire house of cards crashing down. The silence that followed my revelation was different from all the others. It wasn't tense or oppressive. It was heavy with the weight of shattered illusions. Mark sat frozen, the printed email trembling in his hand. Emily was openly crying now, not the crocodile tears of manipulation I had seen before, but the raw, ugly sobs of complete and utter defeat. Her whole body shook. "Get out," Mark finally said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. He didn't look at her, he just stared at the wall ahead, at a framed photo of him and his father fishing on a lake. "Just get out of this house." "Mark, please," Emily wept, reaching for his arm. "Please, we can fix this. I love you, I really do." He recoiled from her touch as if he'd been burned. "Love me, or love what you thought my family could give you. All this time, every dinner, every holiday, was it all an act?" The questions hung in the air, unanswered because the answer was too painful to voice. He finally turned to look at her, and I saw a cold fury in my son's eyes that I had never seen before. "Go, now." Emily seemed to shrink. Without another word, she stumbled to her feet, grabbed her purse, and practically fled from the room. A moment later, we heard the front door slam shut, the sound echoing through the quiet house like a gunshot. Mark remained on the sofa, his head in his hands. I didn't rush to comfort him. I gave him the space he needed to process the implosion of his reality. The study was filled with the sound of his ragged breathing. After what felt like an eternity, he looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and filled with a profound, agonizing shame. "You knew," he said, his voice thick. "Dad knew, didn't he? That's why he wrote that letter. That's why he put that clause in the will." I nodded slowly. He suspected. He didn't have proof, but his instincts were telling him something was wrong. He wanted to protect us. And I didn't see it, he whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. I was right here, and I didn't see it. I defended her. I let her treat you that way. The last words were choked with regret. He stood up, walked over to the armchair where I sat, and knelt before me, burying his face in my lap. His shoulders shook with the force of his sobs. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I wrapped my arms around him, stroking his hair, just as I did when he was a little boy who'd fallen and scraped his knee. It's not your fault, Mark. She is very good at what she does. You fell in love. You wanted to believe in the best in her. We stayed like that for a long time. It was a painful, necessary catharsis. The lies had been purged, and in the raw, aching space they left behind, the truth of our relationship could begin to heal. This was one of the hardest moments of my life, but also one of the most important. It was the start of a new chapter for both of us. Stories like this are complicated, just like real life. If my journey has resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you shared this video with someone you think might appreciate it. Now, back to how we picked up the pieces. The weeks that followed were a period of careful reconstruction. Mark moved into our spare bedroom for a while. He needed the space away from the condo and the life he had shared with Emily. He filed for divorce. Emily, through her lawyer, did not contest it. She didn't fight for a single asset. I think the threat of her fraudulent behavior being made public in court was enough to ensure her swift and silent departure. I never saw her again. I heard through Mr. Davies that she moved back to Tampa, presumably to face the financial demons she had tried so hard to outrun. Mark and I had many long talks. He learned about the business I had helped build, the quiet strength his father had always admired in me. He started to see me not as his aging, quiet mother, but as Carol, the woman who had been the bedrock of his family all along. He went to therapy to understand how he had become so blind to the manipulation, to rebuild his own self-worth. It was a difficult journey for him, but he faced it with a courage I was immensely proud of. As for me, a surprising lightness had settled in my life. The label of useless had been incinerated in the fire of the truth. I found I had more energy, more purpose. I took over the management of the estate with a renewed vigor, making savvy investment decisions that would have made Robert proud. I started volunteering at the local library, helping adults learn to read, my quiet nature becoming a source of comfort for them, not a weakness. One sunny Saturday morning, about a year later, Mark and I were in the garden. He had been helping me build a new raised bed for vegetables. His laughter was genuine again, the haunted look in his eyes finally gone. He was dating someone new, a kind and down-to-earth teacher who seemed to adore him for exactly who he was. "You know, Mom," he said, wiping sweat from his brow, "I was thinking about Dad's will. That character and integrity clause. It was genius. It wasn't just about the money." "No," I said, smiling as I patted the soil around a young tomato plant. "It was never about the money. It was about value. It was about reminding us what's actually important: honesty, respect, and the strength to protect the people you love." He looked at me, his eyes full of a new kind of respect. "You're not useless, Mom. You're the most useful person I know." And in that moment, under the warm Florida sun, surrounded by the life I was nurturing, I felt whole. I had lost the love of my life, but I had not lost myself. I had been tested, insulted, and underestimated, but I had listened to the wisdom of my husband, trusted my own instincts, and reclaimed not just my family's legacy, but my own voice. The house was no longer silent with loneliness, but quiet with a peaceful, resilient strength. And that was the greatest inheritance of all,